Mary's story is truly exceptional. She was in the first wave of Vietnamese boat people to enter U.S. territory via the sea following the Vietnam War. Her harrowing journey in 1975 took her across the Pacific Ocean in a fishing boat. And then from a refugee camp to the State House of Massachusetts. She was not only honored for her many years of work with refugees, but also became the longest-serving commissioner of the Massachusetts Office for Refugees and Immigrants, running it for almost a decade.
Over 2 million desperate people left Vietnam in small boats in the 1970s. I'm worried that if the wars in Ukraine and Middle East escalate, the world is going to see many millions more refugees fleeing their homeland just to survive.
I was just 9 when my father received a death threat for having refused to pay tax to the communists. He ignored it, so the hired killer shot him. But the bullet hit my mother and my 6-year-old brother while they, my sister and I, were in the car.
After the fall of South Vietnam to the communists from the north, people faced widespread persecution.
We were very afraid. People were desperate. Many of our friends and neighbors had no choice but to flee our homeland.
Her father summoned his 9 children and his mother-in-law on the evening of April 29th and asked them to prepare to leave Vietnam early in the next morning at 5 a.m.
I asked my father where we would go and what I should pack for the journey. He replied that we're going to the U.S. in search of freedom and that material things aren't important. It's the spiritual life that matters, and being together as a family is the most important of all. I left Vietnam with a small dictionary and my pajamas. On April 30th, 1975, my father tried to leave Saigon by car with his 9 children and mother-in-law. We saw chaos on the streets.
Mary saw a helicopter that had crashed on top of a school bus and killed some people lying next to it with newspapers draped on top of their bodies. Drivers beeped their horns loudly, trying to pass. She also saw a military officer and his wife get shot in their car. She was just 14. Her father drove them to Gokong, about 60 kilometers from Saigon. That's where they would catch a boat. They were stopped by a group of communist soldiers. Her father took his watch and gave it to their commander, who let them go.
We were the only boat that tried to leave at that time. This boat came in from elsewhere to the shore to refuel and to repair the leakage, so my father negotiated to buy it from the owner. It was scary for me to get onto the boat, and it was anchored further out in the deep water, and I didn't know how to swim. It was scarier once I got into the boat. I heard shots fired into the air and voices asking us to freeze from moving away.
When we tried to move away from the shore, shots fired at us. The children had to duck down so the bullets would not hit us. My grandmother asked the older siblings, including me, to cover our younger siblings like a human shield.
There would be about 40 people on the boat. The men had to water out the boat's leakages so it would not sink. They did not have any water or food. Some of them were terribly seasick.
It was difficult to witness an old man trying to jump into the sea if the ship would not go back to Vietnam. His family members tried to calm him down and convince him to change his mind. He screamed, and the relatives crying out loud, trying to hold him back. When we saw the U.S. Navy ship and the sailors smile at us, I felt so relieved. No words could describe how lucky I was to be rescued. The American sailors looked happy and kind, I thought. Everyone took his or her turn climbing up the ropes and tried to find an empty space on the ship to settle down. My first meal on the ship was with mixed emotions.
I was hungry and happy to receive my food, but as I started my first bite, there came a piece of soiled toilet paper flew right onto my face from someone using a makeshift toilet near where I sat, in addition to having the urine splattered.
According to her relatives back in Vietnam, if her father had stayed in Vietnam, he would have been executed, and her family would be sent to the new economic or labor zone.
We were lucky to escape, but life in the camps where we stayed before we could settle into our new home was far from easy. The first camp we stayed at was Subic Bay in the Philippines after we got rescued. I remember seeing my grandmother throwing away the Vietnamese money in the trash barrel as our life savings became worthless. At least we were alive and together. I was a happy child overall. I received a lot of love and attention from my parents, especially my mother, for being the youngest daughter among my two older sisters. I was very talkative. I ran around the house singing and dancing, as well as playing many games with my brothers and their friends. My mother was an elegant woman. She always dressed well regardless of the occasion. She took me to her work office often. She taught me how to be kind, respectful, and helping all people whenever I could. I remember once she bought me a black and white doll. I was surprised. She taught me that people are the same even though their skin colors are different. Home was sad and lonely after my mom died because of complications from the gunshot. I became a caretaker for my youngest brother Phúc. He was just 1 year old when she passed away. The second camp was on Guam Island. We stayed there for about a month, and my father had to decide in which country he would like to resettle. He chose going to the U.S. since he had some American friends. Dr. Lloyd and his wife Jackie asked the St. Bede Catholic Church in Pittsburgh to sponsor us. We moved to Pittsburgh right after leaving a third camp called Fort Indian Town Gap in Pennsylvania. The church had rented a house for us. The biggest barrier for us was not being able to communicate with anyone. I recall the fear of not understanding English and had to answer someone either on the telephone or at the front door. My grandmother said she felt deaf and mute for not knowing any English. I tried learning English as fast as I could. We tried to adjust to the new life, the culture and the environment. We faced prejudice and we still do.
I love my dad for all his sacrifices. He went from being a proud businessman in South Vietnam to mopping the floors of the Frick Museum in Pittsburgh. He taught his daughters to be self-sufficient and not be dependent on the husband or anyone for support, and that we must have an education.
Home life became better as we acculturated over time. I made friends with the girls at my high school and got used to the cold a little bit more. I feel happy when I'm able to help people. Therefore, regardless of which industry, my goal was to help anyone I come across. I worked as a counselor, then a banking vice president.
At the same time, she volunteered and served on several boards and commissions, such as a community-based hospital serving low-income residents, Vietnamese refugees, and other ethnic minorities. So later, she joined the hospital as the Director of Business Development and Community Benefits.
When I learned of the job available in the state government serving all refugees and immigrants across the Commonwealth, I applied. I knew that with my personal experience and insights, I could help refugees start a new life easier and better.
She was not just the longest-serving commissioner, but also had been recognized for her work by federal and state partners as well as many other charitable organizations.
I was a former refugee and struggled to integrate to achieve the American dream, so I knew firsthand what some other refugees and immigrants faced and their needs.
I have witnessed what refugees arriving from Ukraine, Haiti, Afghanistan, Syria, and Africa are facing now. My message to them is, don't give up hope.
All refugees want to be self-sufficient, yet they face many challenges which they will overcome. History has taught us the lesson of how to support an enormous, unexpected arrival of people, but how prepared are we for when it happens again, and in the near future? Mary's programs have helped about 1,800 people become U.S. citizens each year, distributed over 1,200 welcome toolkits to the new refugees in Massachusetts, and provided financial education to the many other thousands. And as a result, within 4 months of arriving in the United States, about 1/3 of the refugees, many with little English, found successful employment.
Refugees want to integrate into the society where they live, but face isolation due to being in the new environment and having language and cultural barriers.
If a little girl coming from a war-torn country with no money, no language, and no friend like me could make it in America, every refugee can do it as well. I know they will make their new home better if we open our heart and mind to accept them. Vietnamese refugees have made positive contribution to the country where they have resettled. We also raised the awareness of how terrible it would be living under an oppressive regime. We brought our dedication, hard work, talents, culture, knowledge, and loyalty to our new country. We try to give back as much as we're able to our new society. War and persecution. My fear is that the world is turning toward communism and there'll be no freedom and democracy for people. The best piece of advice I have received from my parents was, be happy as life is short.
Over 2 million people left Vietnam between 1975, after the fall of Saigon, and 1990, most of them by boat. The United Nations estimates that 1 in 3 Vietnamese boat people died at sea by drowning, starvation, illness, or because of pirates. The United States accepted approximately 132,000 Vietnamese refugees during the first wave of the crisis and 900,000 more in subsequent years. During her public career, Mary Truong has helped to resettle over 50,000 refugees of all nationalities. According to the UNHCR, as of June 24, 2024, there were 44 million refugees worldwide, and they've been waiting for years or decades to be admitted to a new country to rebuild their lives.
Throughout my career, I saw refugees escaping from oppressive regimes all over the world. Nobody deserves to live in poverty and fear. But this is the reality of so many people around the world.